Eleanor Whitmore did not inherit success. She built it from nothing, and every inch of her business carried the weight of her sacrifice, her sleepless nights, and her unbreakable will. This is not just a business story. It is a powerful emotional story about ambition, family, and a hidden truth that would later change everything. In the beginning there was no luxury, no big office, no investors waiting to believe in her. There was only a small rented space in London, a worn-out desk, and a woman who refused to fail. People laughed at her ideas. They doubted her strength, and they underestimated her vision. But Eleanor had something they didn't understand. She had focus. She had discipline, and she had a quiet fire that refused to go out. Day after day she worked harder than everyone around her, learning, building, fixing mistakes, growing stronger. Slowly the company began to rise. One client became 5, 5 became 50, and before anyone realized it, Eleanor Whitmore had built a powerful business empire. This was no luck. This was strategy. This was pain, and this was persistence. But behind the success was something even deeper. Something more personal. She was not just building a company. She was building a legacy, and that legacy had a name, Oliver Whitmore. Her son. From a young age Eleanor saw greatness in him. She believed he would one day lead everything she created. She trusted him completely, and that trust would later become the most dangerous thing in her life. As Oliver grew older, Eleanor began to bring him closer to the business. She taught him everything: how to lead, how to negotiate, how to read people, how to stay strong under pressure. She gave him access to meetings. She allowed him to sit in rooms where powerful decisions were made. She showed him how to think like a CEO, and slowly, she began to step back, not because she was weak, but because she believed she was preparing the future. This is where the story takes a turn. Because sometimes the people you build for are the same people who plan your downfall. At first everything seemed normal. Oliver was smart, confident, and ambitious. The board members liked him, investors respected him, and employees looked up to him. Eleanor felt proud. She believed her legacy was safe, but what she didn't see was the shift happening behind closed doors. Quiet conversations, subtle changes, small decisions made without her knowledge. At first it was easy to ignore. She told herself it was growth. She told herself Oliver was learning to lead, but deep down something felt wrong. Something felt different, and this is where the seeds of betrayal began to grow, because power changes people, and when ambition is mixed with impatience, it creates a dangerous path. Oliver didn't want to wait. He didn't want to earn his position slowly. He wanted control, he wanted power, and he believed it was already his. This is what makes this story so powerful and so real, because family betrayal is the most painful kind of betrayal. It is not just about business. It is about trust. It is about loyalty. And it is about the shocking truth that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who underestimate you the most. Eleanor Whitmore was not just a mother. She was a founder, a leader, and a woman who understood one important thing: power is never given, it is protected. And while everyone believed they knew the full story, there was a hidden secret that had not yet been revealed. Something that would later shock everyone in the boardroom. Something that would expose the biggest mistake anyone could make: underestimating her. This is only the beginning of a boardroom drama filled with tension, emotion, and an unexpected twist that will leave you questioning everything you thought you understood about power and family. So if you are enjoying this powerful story about betrayal, leadership, and a shocking truth, make sure you hit the subscribe button right now. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from and what you think is going to happen next. Because what comes next will change everything, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. The change did not happen in one loud moment. It happened quietly, slowly, and almost invisibly, which is what made it so dangerous. Eleanor Whitmore began to notice small things that did not feel right. Meetings were scheduled without her, decisions were made before she was informed, and conversations would suddenly stop when she entered the room. At first she told herself it was nothing, just growth, just evolution, but deep inside she felt it. A shift in power. A silent movement that carried the weight of something bigger, something hidden, something that would soon become impossible to ignore. This is how betrayal often begins, not with noise, but with silence, not with confrontation, but with distance, and in this case, it was family betrayal. the kind that cuts deeper than any business loss. Oliver Whitmore was changing. The same son she had trusted, mentored, and supported was now becoming someone else. Someone more calculated, more distant, more focused on control than connection. He spoke differently, he moved differently, and most importantly, he started building relationships Eleanor knew nothing about. Board members who once stood firmly with her were now spending more time with him. Investors who used to call her directly were now reaching out to Oliver. It was subtle, but it was clear. Influence was shifting, and with influence comes power. Eleanor watched carefully. She did not react emotionally. She did not confront him immediately, because she understood something critical. Reacting too early in a power struggle reveals weakness, and Eleanor Whitmore was not weak. She was patient, strategic, and observant. She began to listen more than she spoke. She paid attention to details others would ignore. She noticed who avoided her eyes, who hesitated before answering simple questions, who suddenly became overly supportive of Oliver's ideas. And that is when the shocking truth began to form in her mind. This was not random, this was planned, this was a calculated move, and at the center of it was her own son. One morning everything became clear. Oliver walked into her office without knocking, calm, confident, and completely sure of himself. There was no hesitation in his voice, no respect in his tone, just certainty. "Mom, it's time you step aside," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy, cold, and final. For a brief moment the room felt smaller, not because Eleanor was afraid, but because she understood exactly what those words meant. This was no suggestion, this was a declaration. This was the moment where ambition crossed the line into betrayal. Eleanor looked at him, not with anger, not with shock, but with a calm that made the moment even more intense. She had seen enough in her life to recognize when someone believed they had already won, and that is exactly what Oliver believed. He continued speaking, explaining his vision, his plans, his ideas for the future of the company. He spoke about growth, expansion, and new leadership, using all the right words, presenting himself as the solution, but behind those words was something much darker: control. He had already spoken to the board, he had already built alliances, and in his mind, the decision was already made. This was no longer a conversation between mother and son, this was a power struggle inside a business empire, and the stakes were everything. Eleanor listened without interrupting, without reacting, without showing any sign of emotion, because she understood something Oliver did not. The moment you reveal your fear, you lose your position, and Eleanor Whitmore had no intention of losing anything. After he finished, there was silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from confusion, but the kind that comes from understanding. Eleanor finally spoke, her voice steady, controlled, and clear. "Is that what you believe?" she asked. Oliver nodded, confident, almost relieved, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. What he didn't realize was that this moment was not the end of Eleanor's story. It was the beginning of his biggest mistake, because while he believed he had uncovered the truth, there was still a hidden secret he knew nothing about, something buried deep within the structure of the company, something that would soon expose everything. The board meeting was scheduled, the stage was set, and the tension was building. This was no longer just a business decision, this was a test of power, of loyalty, and of intelligence. This was where everything would be revealed, and this is what makes this story so powerful, because it shows how quickly trust can turn into betrayal, how easily people can underestimate someone who built everything from the ground up, and how dangerous it is to assume you understand the full picture when you only see part of it. Eleanor Whitmore did not argue, she did not fight, and she did not try to convince anyone. Instead she prepared, quietly, strategically, and with precision, because she knew one thing for sure: the boardroom would not just be a place for discussion, it would be the place where the truth came out, where the unexpected twist would shock everyone, and where the biggest mistake would finally be exposed. So as the story continues and the tension rises, make sure you stay with me. Hit the subscribe button, like this video, share it with others, and drop a comment below telling me if you think Oliver is right, or if Eleanor is about to reveal something that will change everything. Because what happens next in that boardroom will leave everyone speechless. The day of the board meeting arrived with a heavy silence that seemed to press against the walls of the building. This was not just another meeting. This was a moment that would decide power, control, and the future of everything Eleanor Whitmore had built. The atmosphere was tense, filled with unspoken thoughts, hidden agendas, and quiet expectations. Everyone in that room knew something big was about to happen, but no one truly understood the full truth. And that is what made this moment so dangerous. One by one the board members took their seats, investors sat with serious expressions, executives avoided eye contact, and at the head of the table sat Oliver Whitmore, calm, confident, and completely convinced that this was his moment. He looked prepared, polished, and in control, the kind of confidence that comes from believing you have already won. Eleanor walked in last, not rushed, not nervous, but composed. Her presence alone shifted the energy in the room. She did not need to speak to be noticed, because true power does not announce itself, it is felt. She took her seat quietly, observing everything, every face, every movement, every sign of loyalty or doubt. This was not just a meeting for her, this was a test of truth, a moment where betrayal would either succeed or be exposed completely. The meeting began with formalities, but no one was focused on that. All attention was on Oliver. He stood up confidently and began his presentation. His voice was steady, his words were sharp, and his delivery was flawless. He spoke about growth, about change, about a new direction for the company. He used powerful language, the kind that convinces people, the kind that makes doubt disappear. He presented charts, projections, and strategies that made him look like the future of the company, and slowly, you could feel the room leaning toward him. This is how influence works. It builds quietly, it spreads subtly, and before you realize it, it starts to control the narrative. Oliver continued, building momentum, reinforcing his position, making it clear that he was ready to lead. Then came the moment that defined everything. He paused, looked around the room, and said it clearly. I believe it is time for new leadership. The words were direct, powerful, and final. Silence followed immediately, not confusion, but tension. Every person in that room understood what that statement meant. This was not just a suggestion, this was a move to remove Eleanor Whitmore, the founder, the backbone, the woman who built everything from nothing. All eyes turned toward her, waiting, watching, expecting a reaction, but Eleanor did not react the way they expected. She did not show anger, she did not defend herself, and she did not interrupt. Instead she stood up slowly, calm, controlled, and completely unshaken. Her silence carried more power than any speech Oliver had given, and in that moment something shifted. Something subtle but important, doubt. The same people who were leaning toward Oliver began to feel uncertain, because true authority does not panic, it does not rush, it stands firm. Eleanor looked around the room, making eye contact with each person, and then she spoke, her voice steady and clear. Before any vote is taken, there is something you all need to see. The room grew even quieter. Curiosity replaced confidence, tension replaced certainty. This was unexpected, and in stories like this, the unexpected is where everything changes. She reached into her folder and began handing out a document to each board member. One by one they took it, glancing down casually at first, but within seconds their expressions began to change. Confusion appeared, followed by surprise and then shock, real shock, the kind that cannot be hidden. Whispers began to spread across the table. Eyes widened, and suddenly the room no longer felt controlled by Oliver. It felt uncertain, unstable, and unpredictable. Oliver noticed it immediately. His confidence started to crack. His posture changed, and for the first time he looked unsure. What is this? He asked, his voice no longer as strong as before. Eleanor turned to him slowly, her expression calm but firm, and said, "It is the truth." Those words carried weight. They carried meaning, and they carried the power of a hidden secret finally being revealed. This was the moment everything began to collapse for Oliver, because what he thought he understood about the company, about power, and about control was only a part of the full picture. And now the full picture was being exposed in front of everyone. The document detailed the true ownership structure of the company, something that had been carefully built and protected over the years, something that no one had fully questioned. And as the board members read further, the shocking truth became clear. Eleanor Whitmore was not just the founder, she was untouchable. The room fell into complete silence, not the tense silence from before, but a heavy silence filled with realization, the kind of silence that follows a truth too big to ignore. Oliver stood there, frozen, his plan, his confidence, his belief in his own control, all of it slipping away in real time. This is what makes this moment so powerful, because it shows how quickly power can shift, how dangerous it is to underestimate someone who has built everything, and how one hidden truth can destroy an entire plan. The boardroom was no longer a place of decision, it had become a place of revelation, and the biggest mistake had just been exposed. So as this emotional story continues to unfold and the consequences of this shocking twist begin to take shape, make sure you stay with me, hit the subscribe button, like this video, share it with others, and drop a comment below telling me what you think will happen next, because the final outcome will change everything in a way no one in that room was prepared for. The silence in the boardroom did not break immediately, it lingered, heavy and undeniable, as every single person tried to process the shocking truth that had just been revealed. This was no longer a discussion about leadership, it was no longer a simple power struggle, this had become something deeper, something final, something that exposed not just a plan, but a betrayal, and at the center of it all stood Eleanor Whitmore, calm, composed, and completely in control, while Oliver Whitmore stood frozen, the confidence he walked in with now replaced by disbelief, because in one moment everything he thought he understood about power had collapsed. The document in front of the board members was clear, precise, and impossible to challenge. It showed that Eleanor had secured controlling shares through a carefully structured private trust years ago, during a time when the company was still growing and vulnerable. She had made a decision not just to protect the business, but to protect its future from exactly this kind of situation, and that decision had now changed everything. No vote could remove her, no alliance could override her authority, and no strategy could outplay what had already been secured. This was not luck, this was foresight, this was leadership, and this was the difference between someone who builds power and someone who only tries to take it. The board members slowly placed the documents down. Some avoided eye contact. Others looked directly at Eleanor with a new level of respect, because the truth had shifted the entire room. The same people who once considered supporting Oliver were now silent, unsure, and cautious. This is how quickly influence changes when the full picture is revealed. Eleanor stood there, not celebrating, not reacting emotionally, but simply holding her position, because she understood something important. Real power does not need to prove itself loudly, it reveals itself at the right moment. Oliver finally spoke, his voice lower now, uncertain. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. The question was not just about the document, it was about everything, about trust, about control, about the hidden secret he never saw coming. Eleanor looked at him, not with anger, but with clarity, and in that moment this was no longer just a business confrontation, it was a lesson, a powerful and painful one. Because you were not ready, she said calmly, her voice steady, and because power is not something you announce, it is something you protect. Her words cut deeper than any argument could, because they carried truth, the kind of truth that exposes mistakes, the kind that forces reflection. Oliver had believed he was prepared. He had believed he understood the company, the board, and the structure of control, but he had only seen the surface, and that is the danger of ambition without patience. It creates confidence without understanding. The room remained quiet as the weight of that realization settled in. The meeting, which was supposed to be a defining victory for Oliver, had turned into a complete reversal, a moment where his biggest mistake had been exposed in front of everyone, and there was nothing he could do to change it. Eleanor turned her attention back to the board, her presence once again commanding the room. This meeting is concluded, she said firmly. There was no need for a vote, no need for further discussion, because the truth had already made the decision clear. One by one the board members stood up and left the room, some nodding respectfully toward Eleanor, others still processing what they had witnessed. This was more than a business outcome, this was a powerful emotional story of leadership, betrayal, and the unexpected twist that changed everything. Soon the room was empty, leaving only Eleanor and Oliver. The distance between them now felt greater than ever, not because of the company, but because of what had happened between them. Oliver looked at her again, searching for something, maybe understanding, maybe forgiveness, but Eleanor remained firm, not cold, but clear, because some lessons cannot be softened, they must be faced fully. She picked up her documents, composed as always, and walked toward the door, not rushed, not shaken, but steady, every step a reminder that she was still the foundation of everything. As she reached the door, she paused for a brief moment, not to look back in regret, but to acknowledge the moment for what it was, the turning point. Not just for the company, but for both of them. Then she walked out, leaving behind a silence that carried the weight of everything that had just happened. This is what makes this story so powerful and so real, because it shows that betrayal does not always win, that hidden truths have the power to change everything, and that those who are underestimated often hold the greatest strength. Eleanor Whitmore did not just protect her company, she protected her legacy, and in doing so she reminded everyone in that room that leadership is not given, it is built, earned and defended. So if this story moved you, if this moment made you think about power, trust, and the choices we make sure you hit the subscribe button right now, like this video, share it with others, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in Eleanor's position. Would you forgive? Or would you walk away? Because in the end, the real question is not who had the power, but who truly understood it. The story did not end in that boardroom. Because moments like that do not simply disappear, they leave a mark, they create consequences, and they force people to face truths they were not ready to see. Eleanor Whitmore walked out of that meeting with her power intact, her authority unquestioned, and her position stronger than ever, but inside, she understood something deeper, something that went beyond business. This was no longer just about a company, this was about trust, about family betrayal, and about the cost of ambition when it is driven by impatience. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. The company continued to run, decisions were made, meetings were held, but there was a shift in the atmosphere, a new awareness, a new respect for Eleanor, and a new distance between her and Oliver Whitmore. The same people who once doubted her now treated her with caution, because the shocking truth she revealed had changed how everyone saw her. She was no longer just a leader, she was untouchable, and that kind of power creates both respect and fear. Oliver, on the other hand, had changed completely. The confidence that once defined him was replaced with silence. He still came to work, still attended meetings, but something was different. The sharp energy, the calculated presence, the ambition that pushed him forward. It had been shaken, not destroyed, but forced to slow down. And this is what makes this part of the story so important, because failure, especially public failure, either breaks a person or rebuilds them, and Oliver was now standing at that exact point. One evening, long after everyone had left the office, Oliver walked into Eleanor's office again, but this time he did not enter with confidence. He entered with hesitation. He stood there for a moment before speaking, as if choosing his words carefully. "I was wrong," he said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried weight. This was not the same man who had walked in days before demanding control. This was someone who had faced the truth, someone who had seen the consequences of underestimating the very person who built everything. Eleanor looked at him, studying him, not as a CEO evaluating an executive, but as a mother trying to understand her son. Silence filled the room again, but this time it was different. It was not tense, it was reflective. Oliver continued, "I thought I understood everything. I thought I was ready, but I see now. I only saw part of it." This was the moment where the emotional story reached a new level, because this was no longer about power. It was about growth, about realization, about facing the hidden truth within yourself. Eleanor finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "You didn't fail because you wanted to lead," she said. "You failed because you tried to take what you had not yet earned." Her words were not meant to hurt. They were meant to teach, because real leadership is not about titles or positions. It is about understanding responsibility, patience, and timing. Oliver nodded slowly, accepting the truth, not defending himself, not arguing, just listening, and in that moment something began to change. Not in the company, but in him. Days turned into weeks, and slowly Oliver started rebuilding himself, not by seeking control, but by learning again, by observing, by earning trust step by step. The board members noticed it, the executives noticed it, and Eleanor noticed it most of all. This is what makes this chapter so powerful, because it shows that even after betrayal, even after a shocking mistake, there is still a path forward, but that path requires humility, discipline, and the willingness to grow. Eleanor did not hand him power. She did not give him a position out of emotion. Instead she gave him something more valuable, a second chance to earn it the right way. And this is where the unexpected twist of the story becomes clear. the greatest victory was not the boardroom, it was what came after, the rebuilding, the understanding, and the transformation, because in the end, the real lesson was not about who controlled the company, it was about who truly understood what it meant to lead. Eleanor Whitmore remained the foundation, strong, respected, and in control, but now she was also something else, a reminder that true power is not just about holding authority, it is about knowing when to protect it and when to guide others toward it, and Oliver, once driven by ambition alone, was now learning what it truly meant to earn his place. This is the kind of real-life story that stays with you, because it reflects something deeper, something we all face in different ways, the balance between ambition and patience, between desire and discipline, between taking and earning. So if this story has taught you something, if it made you think, feel, or reflect on your own journey, make sure you like this video, share it with others, and drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from, because when you engage, more powerful stories like this will be sent directly to you, and trust me, the next story will be even more shocking, even more emotional, and even more unforgettable.